by Mr. Marlon G. Knight.
God, we thank you today. We thank you for this day that we honor a great person. God, we thank you for everything that has came forward to help us to understand, God, to be with one another, God, and to share everything that has been given. God, I thank you, and I ask, oh God, that you make this a success today, that you shine upon us, oh God, that we take something from here, God, that we can hold dear to our heart, and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please be seated. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed into law a bill designating the third Monday in January as a federal holiday, commemorating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. The holiday honors the life and contributions of America's greatest champion of racial justice and equality, the leader who not only dreamed of a colorblind society, but who also led a movement that achieved historic reforms to help make it a reality. To commemorate his birthday, please direct your attention to the screen for a short video on the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, and graduated as the valedictorian of Crozier Theological Seminary in 1951. King became pastor of a Baptist church in Montgomery, Alabama, and later completed his Ph.D.
Martin Luther King was a religious man. He was a pastor and looked at racism and all of the so-called separate but equal laws and the terrible treatment of people of color in the United States. And he said, this is absolutely wrong. This is against God's will. This is not recognizing the dignity of peoples. And he made us all face that in very powerful ways.
On the eve of Rosa Parks' refusal to move to the back of a city bus in 1955, King was chosen to lead a citywide bus boycott. 2 years later, King and a group of civil rights activists formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to conduct nonviolent protests for civil rights.
When Martin Luther King led the Alabama boycott, that was a major turning point in the fight for civil rights. What you saw was people who had been fractionized coming together as one, walking together with others joining the fight. This was when people, America, the world, stood up and said, whoa, what are we looking at here? An amazing time.
Inspired by Gandhi's activism, King worked with the SCLC to organize black voters and civil rights protests. In 1963, King was arrested at a march in Alabama. During his prison time, King wrote a rebuttal to an article denouncing his methods. His longhand notes on the margins of the newspaper became known as Letter from Birmingham Jail. and was famously republished and studied in colleges across the country.
Martin Luther King was a man of God who believed that calling necessitated social change in the present, and he put his life on the line for that calling.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
On August 28, 1963, King led more than 20,000 people in a massive demonstration at the Lincoln Memorial, where his speech, "I Have a Dream," became a defining moment in civil rights history. Through his work, King helped pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and received the Nobel Peace Prize that same year.
Martin Luther King, according to Time in 1963, personified the civil rights movement. He took on one of the greatest challenges of his time and was one of the people that most influenced this very transformative time in American history.
Although King faced criticism from more militant black leaders, he continued his peaceful efforts toward both racial and economic justice. After delivering his "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech at a rally in Memphis, King was assassinated the next day on April 4, 1968, while standing at the balcony of his motel room.
King's assassination was, I think, devastating for many people. But there's also a rising level of organization, and many people, King's assassination galvanizes them into many kind of black power movements across the country, many anti-poverty movements. So it's both a moment of despair, but also a moment of political flowering.
Posthumously, King was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977 and a Congressional Gold Medal in 2004. Today, the Martin Luther King Jr. National Holiday continues to be honored on the third Monday of every January.
Here to introduce the guest speaker is the 194th Armored Brigade Command Sergeant Major Mark L. Daniel.
Good morning. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce an active member in our Tri-City community, a 20-year veteran who is known throughout the community for his orating skills and ability to recite speeches noted by the renowned civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Please give a warm welcome to today's guest speaker, Mr. Danny R. Whitehead.
Giving all honors to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the one who declared that if I be lifted up, then I will draw all men unto me. Protocol has already been established, and so to all of you, good morning. Thank you, Sergeant Major Daniels, for that generous introduction. A special thanks to Mr. Knight and his committee for being so gracious, so dutiful, and so kind as they prepared for this event. I'm grateful and I'm so very humbled to be with you this morning as you celebrate and commemorate the life of a great and noble American, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. On a Wednesday afternoon, April the 3rd of 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. and his team arrived in Memphis, Tennessee to lead a protest against the city of Memphis, who was treating its sanitation workers unfairly. And later on that night, at the Bishop Charles Masonic Temple, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his final message, who many said that he was prophesizing his death, which took place the following day on April the 4th on the second floor balcony of the Lorraine's Hotel when he was fatally shot. And at the 7:05 p.m. hour, April the 4th, St. Joseph Hospital pronounced him dead. And growing up in that community as a little boy at the tender age of 5. There was 2 things that was distinct to me on that day that had me venture to study this great man. One was my family and the adults running in the streets with tears in their eyes. The other was a voice that I do not know who it came from, but it said they didn't kill him. They didn't have to kill him. And so this morning my task is to take you back to April the 3rd of 1968 on a rainy night in Memphis, Tennessee, at the Bishop Charles Masonic Temple, when a young 39-year-old with tears, watery eyes, and the weight of the world on his shoulder walked up to the podium and he said this: "Thank you very kindly, my friends. Something is happening in Memphis, something is happening in our world. You reveal that you are determined to go on anyhow. You know, if I was standing at the beginning of time and the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt. And I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt through the wilderness on across the Red Sea towards the promised land. And in spite of his magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would take my mind to Mount Olympus, and I'd see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Euripides, and Aristophanes assembled around the Parthenon. And I would watch them there around the Parthenon as they discussed the great and eternal issues of man, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even go on by the way that the man for whom I'm named had his habitat. And I would watch Martin Luther as he taxed his 95 theses on the doors of the Church of Wittenberg, but I wouldn't stop there. Yes. I would even come on up to 1863 and see a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there. Yes. I would even come on up to the early 30s and see a man grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation, come with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself, but I wouldn't stop there. Yes. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. Now that's a strange statement to make because the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is in the land. Confusion all around. That's a strange statement. But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And I can see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way that men in some strange way of responding, something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they are assembled today, whether they're in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. Yes. Another reason that I'm happy to live in this period is that we have been forced to a point where we're going to have to grapple with the problem that men have been trying to grapple with throughout history. But the demands then forced them to do it. survival demands that we grapple with them. Men for years now have been talking about war and peace. But now no longer can we just talk about it. It is no longer the choice between violence or non-violence in this world. It's non-violence or non-existence. That is where we are today. Also in the human rights revolution, if some men are done in a hurry, bring the colored people to the world out of their long years of poverty, their long years of hurt and neglect, the whole world is doomed. Now I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period, to see what is unfolding. And I'm happy that he's allowed me to be in Memphis. I can remember when Mrs. King and I were first in Jerusalem. We rented a car and drove from Jerusalem down to Jericho. As soon as I got on that road, I said to my wife, I can see why Jesus used this as the setting for his parables. It's a winding, meandering road, really conducive for ambushing. You start out in Jerusalem, which is about 1,200 miles, or rather 1,200 feet above sea level. And by the time you get down to Jericho 15 or 20 minutes later, you're about 2,200 feet below sea level. Now that's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the bloody path. You know, it's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over that man laying on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible he felt that the man was merely faking. And he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over there. Love them there for quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I just stop to help this man, what would happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came by and he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what would happen to him? That's the question before you today. The question is not, if I stop to help this man, what would happen to me? The question is not, if I stop to help this man, what would happen to my job? The question is not, if I stop to help this man in need, what will happen to all of the hours that I usually spend in my office every day and every week as a pastor? Question is, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? That's the question. Let us rise up today with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on. In these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be, we have an opportunity to make America a better nation. And I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City, autographing the first book that I had written. And while I was sitting there autographing books, a black woman came up. Only question I heard from her was, "You, Martin Luther King?" And I was looking down right, and when I said yes, next minute I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon. That blade had gone through, and x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. And once that's punctured, you drown in your own blood. That's the end of you. It came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had nearly sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out, to move around in a wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states in the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received one from the president and the vice president, but I've forgotten what those telegrams just said. I received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I've forgotten what that letter said. But there was another letter. Came from a little girl, a young girl, who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter and I'll never forget it. It said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School." Said, while it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering. And I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. I'm simply writing to say to you that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze. And I want to say today, I want to say today that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze, because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960, when students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream, taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy, which was dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1961 when we decided to take a ride for freedom and ended segregation in interstate travel. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962 when Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963 when black people, Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had. If I had sneezed, wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who were suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze. And they were telling me, no, it doesn't matter now. Really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. The pilot said over the public address system, "We're sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane. Be sure that all of the bags was checked. Be sure that nothing would be wrong on the plane." And they've had to check out everything carefully. And they've had the plane protected and guarded all night. Yes. And then I got into Memphis. And some began to talk about the threats, or say the threat that were out, or what would happen to me from some of our white brothers. Well, I don't know what would happen now. We got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know today that we as the people shall get to the promised land. And so I'm happy today. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes are seeing the glory of the coming of the Lord. Thank you very much.
Please direct your attention to the center of the stage where Sergeant Major Mark L. Daniel will present Mr. Danny Whitehead with a token of appreciation.
That was amazing, right? Mr. Whitehead, I want to thank you for lending us your talents on this morning and making this observance the success it has been. Thank you, sir. So on behalf of General Brito, Command Sergeant Major Celestine, Colonel Allen, and myself, I want to thank you all for your support today and helping us honor this great American and great world leader. I want to thank the staff for putting this together. So if you don't mind, join me in a round of applause for the staff for putting this great event together. Okay, so we have cake. The cake feeds 100 people. So I need 100 people to stand by. All right? Again, thank you for showing up and for your support. One force, one fight, a day on, not a day off. Thank you.